Most people think death is like flipping a switch. Heart stops, brain goes dark, you're gone. But in 2023, a neuroscientist at the University of Michigan watched something impossible. A patient's heart had stopped, clinically dead, and the EEG monitor, it didn't flatline, it exploded. Gamma waves, 300 times higher than normal, higher than a healthy, fully conscious brain. The dying brain wasn't shutting down, it was lighting up. And by the end of this story, you'll understand something that changes everything about how we think about the last moments of life. Because the science says your brain might save its most extraordinary experience for the very end. Jimo Borjigin never meant to study death. She was a neuroscientist at the University of Michigan. Her specialty? The pineal gland, melatonin rhythms, sleep cycles, quiet, methodical work. Then, one day, a rat died in her lab. Not unusual. Rats die in labs. But Borjigin's rats were connected to EEG monitors. And when this rat's heart stopped, the monitor showed something no one expected, a massive surge of organized brain activity. Not random noise, not a dying flicker. Structured, coherent gamma waves, the same brain waves associated with consciousness, attention, and awareness. It was crazy high, she said. She ran the experiment again. Same result. And again. Same result. But here's what made it truly strange. The gamma waves in the dying rats were more intense than in the living ones. The brain, at the moment of death, was more electrically active than it had ever been while alive. That was 2013. It would take her a full decade to answer the question that kept her up at night. Does this happen in humans too? And that's when this story gets truly extraordinary. Because what Borjigin discovered, and what 3 other research teams confirmed, is that dying isn't a moment. It's a 7-minute process. And every minute tells a different story. Let's start the clock. Minute 0. The heart stops pumping. Blood pressure drops to 0. But the brain doesn't know it's dying yet. It has about 20 seconds of oxygen stored in the blood already inside its vessels. For those 20 seconds, you might still be conscious, still processing, still you. Then the oxygen runs out. And what happens next should be silence. A flat line. The textbooks say so. The medical training says so. But the textbooks are wrong. Between 30 seconds and 2 minutes after the heart stops, the brain erupts. Gamma waves surge to 300 times their normal levels. Not scattered, not random, organized. Both hemispheres of the brain suddenly start communicating with each other in ways they never did while the person was alive, and the activity concentrates in one specific region. The TPO junction, where the temporal, parietal, and occipital lobes meet. Think about what that region does. It processes vision. It processes sound. It's the exact area neuroscientists have linked to out-of-body experiences and to dreaming. Now, here's the part that gives researchers chills. If gamma waves are the signature of consciousness, and many neuroscientists believe they are, then this means the dying brain might be generating the most vivid conscious experience of a person's entire life. Not less aware, more aware, not fading out, erupting. But the gamma storm is only half the story, because at the same time, something else floods the brain, something that sounds like it belongs in a science fiction novel. And there's one detail about it that changes what we thought we knew about a very famous molecule. While the gamma storm rages, the brain launches a chemical cascade. Endorphins, the body's own painkillers, flood the system. This might explain why nearly every person who's been brought back from cardiac arrest says the same thing. No pain, profound peace. A warmth they can't quite describe, nor adrenaline surges, the brain's emergency alarm, screaming for the body to fight. But the most fascinating chemical? DMT. You might have heard of it, dimethyltryptamine, the so-called spirit molecule. It produces experiences strikingly similar to what people report during death. Tunnel vision, bright light, encountering beings, a sense of meaning, so deep it reshapes your entire worldview. For years, the popular theory said DMT comes from the pineal gland, that tiny structure deep in the brain. The third eye, Borjigin's team proved that's only partly true. In 2019, they found something remarkable. DMT is produced throughout the entire cerebral cortex, not just one tiny gland. The whole thinking surface of the brain. And during cardiac arrest, DMT levels spike at concentrations comparable to serotonin. They even tested rats with their pineal glands completely removed. The DMT surge still happened. Your brain doesn't need a third eye to flood itself with the most powerful hallucinogenic compound known to neuroscience. It makes its own everywhere. If you're finding this story as mind-blowing as I did when I first read the research, subscribe, because what comes next is the part that's rewriting medical textbooks. Between 5 and 7 minutes, the surface EEG goes silent, the flat line everyone expects. But beneath the surface, something extraordinary is happening. In 2023, a team at the Paris Brain Institute mapped it for the first time. They called it terminal spreading depolarization, the scientific name for the wave of death. It starts in layer 5. Deep inside the cortex, there are neurons shaped like pyramids. Tall, elegant. They're the most energy-hungry cells in the brain. They demand more oxygen, more fuel, more ATP than any other neurons, and they are the first to fail. When their energy runs out, their sodium-potassium pumps stop. The electrical gradient they've maintained since birth, the very charge that makes thought possible, collapses. And that collapse spreads upward toward the brain surface, downward into the white matter. A slow, massive wave of depolarization sweeping through the cortex. But here's the haunting detail. Just before the wave arrives, there's one last flash. A brief surge of gamma and beta activity. One final burst. Severin Mahone, who led the Paris team, said something that stuck with me. These waves are usually associated with a conscious experience. One last flash. Then silence. But even the wave of death has a secret. If the brain is reoxygenated within 2 to 3.5 minutes of that wave, through CPR, through intervention, the process reverses. A wave of resuscitation follows. The neurons recover. Death, even at the cellular level, has a grace period. Sam Parnia wanted to hear from the other side, a critical care researcher at New York University. Parnia spent years running the largest study ever conducted on consciousness during cardiac arrest. 567 patients. The AWARE-2 study. Only 53 survived. Only 28 could be interviewed. But what they reported was consistent. Strikingly consistent. 40% recalled some form of awareness during the time they were clinically dead. 21% described a transcendent experience, leaving their body, reviewing their entire life from a moral perspective, encountering a presence. And 7%, they reported being conscious during CPR itself. They heard the doctors, felt the chest compressions, knew what was happening. While their heart wasn't beating, Parnia's most unsettling finding came in 2024. He proposed what he calls the disinhibition hypothesis. In life, the brain has braking systems, filters, limits on what you can perceive and process. Death removes those brakes. These experiences provide a glimpse into a real, yet little understood dimension of human consciousness. Parnia wrote, that becomes uncovered with death. Here's what stays with me. We've spent centuries terrified of death as darkness and absence, the end of experience. But the science is pointing somewhere stranger. The brain doesn't surrender quietly. It mounts one final, extraordinary performance. More electrical activity, than you've ever produced while alive. A chemical symphony designed by millions of years of evolution. A wave that even has a window, a grace period, before it becomes permanent. We can measure the electricity. We can map the chemicals. We can time the wave. But the one thing we still cannot answer, the question that haunts every researcher in this field, is simple. What does it feel like? The patients who show the most dramatic brain activity are the ones who don't come back to tell us. The science can see the signatures of experience, but proving what someone felt in those final minutes requires a survivor, and the most extraordinary cases produce none. Every person watching this will, one day, find out. That's not meant to frighten you. It's meant to make you wonder. Remember that EEG monitor in Borjigin's lab? The one that was supposed to go flat? It didn't go dark. It lit up 300 times brighter than a living brain. And then, in its final seconds, one last flash. Death is not a switch. It's a storm. And the brain saves its most extraordinary moment for the very end. Speaking of unanswered questions, there's one that's even older and bigger. In 1950, the physicist Enrico Fermi sat down for lunch at Los Alamos National Laboratory. He'd been joking with colleagues about flying saucers. Then he stopped, did the math in his head, and asked a question so simple it silenced the table. There are billions of stars in this galaxy, many older than our sun. If intelligent civilizations are common, they should have visited us by now. So, where's everybody? 76 years later, we still don't have an answer, and the silence is getting louder. Title suggestions. 5 options. 1. What happens when you die? Your brain's last 7 minutes. 2. Your brain doesn't die. It explodes. The science. 3. The 300 STI brain surge. What really happens when you die? 4. Pone. 7 minutes after death. Your brain doesn't die. It explodes. The science. 3. The 300 SEVs brain surge. What really happens when you die? 4. 7 minutes after death. Your brain doesn't die. It explodes. The science. 3. The 300 SEVs brain surge. What really happens when you die? 4. 7 minutes after death. Your brain doesn't die. It explodes. The science. 3. The 300 SEVs brain surge. What really happens when you die? 4. 7 minutes after death. Your brain's final secret. 5. Scientists watched a brain die. What they saw changed everything.